You so much to Books and Books for having us here tonight. And welcome to Dark Matters of Love. Four women writers will read their writing tonight. We are deeply interested in the psychological complexity of characters in the grips of obsession, and we seek to understand what internal conflicts produce their behavior and decisions. The expression of this obsession and the resolution of the question it produces are worked out in the creative writing of the four of us. Dark Matters of Love is part of the 2016 Caribbean series. During this series, readers will enjoy up-close and personal discussions and book signings with authors with ties to the Caribbean and or whose work highlight island culture and interests. Our first reader tonight is Janet Delgado. She's an award-winning Puerto Rican novelist, speaker, and journalist who has written or produced for media outlets such as NBC, CNN, NPR, Univision, HBO, and Vogue magazine's Latin and Mexico divisions, and for Telemundo, among others. She's covered presidential coups, elections, the Olympics, both Iraq wars, and the 9/11 terrorist attacks, 9/11 terrorist attacks. A human interest television series, Madres en la Lejania, won an Emmy Award for its depiction of Latina mothers working as undocumented nannies in the United States while living with the consequences of having left their own children behind in search of a better life. Original screenplay for HBO, Good in Bed, was a thesis on the life moments in which sex, love, identity, self, and society collide. And Jeanette is the author of The Heartbreak Pill and The Clairvoyant of Calle Ocho. She lives in Miami with her husband, Danielle, and her mini Dachshund, Chloe. I give you Jeanette.
Thanks, everyone. Isn't it weird to hear your own bio, right? It's like, oh, okay, I did do that. Thank you for coming on a Sunday. So these ladies have been part of a voyage for me, a path. A couple of years ago, I began to want to write different, to look at different things, to go a little deeper into the things that I'd until then been afraid to look at in my writing. I thought if I wrote it, it would happen. So if I didn't write it, it wouldn't happen, and that was that. Happens anyway, by the way. So I'm really happy and honored to share the event with them and with you. I'm going to start with a ghazal called The Enemy, and then we'll go from there for about 10 minutes or so. So this is The Enemy. Let's see, I think I read better without it. Yeah, I read better without it. I was born in a war-torn wasteland, women nothing but scars with eyes, beautiful bomb craters, brains half blown out, their wounds, their proof that men are the enemy. My grandmother sleepwalked through hell to hold on to her man, lost him anyway, waved her mind goodbye, never could face his willingly living without her, his choosing to be the enemy. Aunt Carmen never married, but her lover did, another woman who forbade her bottomless black eyes from his funeral, as if they and not death were her enemy. My mother's a fool who signed up for the fight, married a 2-cent musician who played Blackberry war songs with his knuckles on her back, as if she, and not his fear, were the enemy. Me, I've always refused to go to war, despite my shell-shocked life, around my hips, my tattered white flag, Anja, last in a family of women without men, as if they, and not our brains, were the enemy. Thank you. Thank you. And then this is called Heartbreak Nation, and I really don't know what it is, so I'm not gonna. And I think this one I'll need these. Heartbreak Nation, Part 1, Consciousness. Every time I read Hunting Mr. Heartbreak, A Discovery of America, I think trust the British to see the heartbreak gripping this country. Alex used to tell me not to worry, that America had always known how to mend its heart after bad loves, reminded me of racism, segregation, discrimination, and the persecution of Vietnam and the assassination of JFK and Martin Luther King. And the depression. Said that's how this country finds its heroes. Promised me we'd get over the towers and the horrible sight of gray-blue bodies falling out of the sky. I remember his words used to help me sleep. Now they just make me want to scratch. Part 2, the skin. Yeah, it's been a month since my skin broke. My dermatologist says I'm doing it to myself, slowly stressing my skin apart at the pores. I can't help feeling he says this because he knew Alex, or knew us back when, and it's what Alex would have said if we still were. To make things worse, today I'm supposed to give a big presentation when I feel shrunken and small and like the hell I look. My boss says bullshit, and this is all their fault, to no one in particular. She called us in for this war room strategy meeting, but now here we sit in her office staring at her thin, tout, locked firmly into place alpha femaleness as she searches for a good fat camp to send her pimply teenage son to this summer. Absent-mindedly saying he'd better grow into himself soon, soon, soon. Oh, he'd better, because if she has to, she will call his father, and then I hear myself tell her I don't give a shit about her son, as angrily as if my own this were all her fault. I don't even realize what I've done until after. She postpones the presentation, tells me to take the day off, looks into my eyes as if she were giving me the gift of a son she'd actually like to spend time with. I don't tell her I spend more time crying in the bathroom next to the cafeteria than working since he moved out. I just thank her and leave. She too makes me want to scratch. And I do. I scratch and scratch until I create uplifted purple-red welts that look like maps, like isolated islands on my arms. And I want to tell Jimmy Ruffin that this is what becomes of the brokenhearted. We scratch ourselves into non-being. Each scratch a gradual erasing of skin, each welt a step closer to purgatory. Months, sometimes years, of not hurting too much, but not being happy either. Part 3, men. Though slow, traffic flows now. My hair follicles itch and my nails run after the tears racing down my neck from trying to tear my skin into thin strips of flesh and this strange craving to rub my breasts to pieces. I'm driving myself to Baptist Hospital for a cortisone shot when my mother calls. She's drunk and lucid. She tells me it's just leftover pain. She says a mother knows and repeats men over and over like my boss says bullshit. Offers to run Alex over for me and for her the next time she bumps into him at the all-night supermarket. She would too. Private doctors don't know crap, she says. Go to Jackson. They've seen everything there. I tell her okay and that I love her, even though sometimes I'm not sure that I do, and hang up. In the emergency room, I sit between two prostitutes, a blind man, and a teenager high on unreasonable rage. I feel free to scratch and even scratch my crotch while looking straight at the attendant. But he has, in fact, seen everything and ignores me. The prostitutes are watching Ellen interviewing Oprah. Oprah wants people to watch a show on her new network about women whose men are still at war. The women are all white, even Oprah. They talk about their brothers and husbands and sons and cry for them and for themselves. They don't look angry. They don't give in to the urge to scratch. Part 4, thought. Now Yvonne, she's one of the prostitutes, says heartbreak is a first world delicacy. Think about it, honey. Hungry people don't have the energy to suffer over one more thing they don't have. I think she's right. In the end, it's about not having what you need and want or what you were supposed to have, because not having it when everyone else seems to makes them better than you, or you worse off than they. She asks me why I scratch so much, calls me child, and I cry, tell her I'm breaking apart. She nods, shows me a 4x6 of herself, part of a client's Figures of Freedom photography series. Her face is painted red and purple and pink, and her big black eyes stare out above tattered red underwear, obviously positioned to suggest violence. She looks helpless, or like I imagine Jesus looks at his murderers from his place at the top of the cross. She tells me about a rocker who fed her once, made her feel safe, says she dreams of him all the time, fights not to wake up so she can hang on to the feeling of having. I understand so much I want to touch her, to scratch her with my bare hands, all the while wondering how her bruises, her brokenness can be so beautiful. Which brings me back to Alex. In the end, we were like hair. a rumpled French chignon, tired of being so sexy, held together by the pins of reason, always slightly on the verge of becoming undone by events of questionable importance and slight breezes. I'm going to read you the poem he chose to leave me, literally, chose to leave for me to find on the night table when I got home from work. Polygamy by Donald Rebel. Yeah. I married a woman knowing I was stealing from her, knowing what becomes of desire in stateless times and at the blurred ends of streets and to the immigrant music of small operas bowed under the beams. Understanding the economy of love fills no shop, liberates no country. No one ever returns after he cheats someone. I remember reading it sitting on the red swan sofa we'd bought that Sunday in New York, the one that had called to us from among the many things at the Chelsea flea market. I read those words until rain began to seep in through the ceiling of our mid-floor flat, until my feet were soaked and I had to open the umbrella with the indigo blue butterflies on it. I read until the butterflies flew off the umbrella and the flapping and the rustling of minute bluish wings turned deafening, the red of the sofa blinding, and I became convinced it was a sick heart instead of a sofa that trapped I'd been sitting on all those years. But I'm fine now. I really am. Don't think much about those days, except maybe once or twice in a dream. I'll be on that little red sofa again, back straight, holding an umbrella for what feels like too long, even in dream time. There'll be an empty fishbowl on my lap, and I'll sit there, the need to scratch for him long gone. The nothing that's left rendering me an unemployed fortune teller, my only job now to stare straight ahead, wait for the rain to stop. Thank you. Thanks so much. Torture almost over for you guys. And then this, I wanted to read this to you tonight because I was inspired to write it just a few days ago after reading one of Amina's stories. It's one of our panel. She wrote a story that scared me to death. And I said, what will I do with this? So, of course, you write, right? You try to scare yourself even more. So this is untitled for obvious reasons. It scares me to death, so. If my home became an elevator on its way down to China, eerily making no sound on its descent to the other side, or rather, to be more realistic, to the center of the earth from where it may never emerge, I'd save the dog and not my husband. The dog belongs to us, and Annie is her name, though I might choose to forget it at that moment. I'd shut the doors and windows tight, and we'd get into the elevator, Annie and I, saving ourselves and leaving David here to deal with all of it, to explain what happened to us and why he didn't stop us. And knowing him, he won't even try to explain that he was listening to music, headsets on as he mowed the lawn, and didn't even notice we were gone until he saw the huge hole where our house used to be. He'd have to console our daughters, now 20 and 23, and still child women so often and in so many ways. They'd leave again after a while, and he'd miss us. Of course he would, but he'd take care of things, which he can only do by taking care of himself. First, he'd build something ingenious to explain the hole through which our house disappeared. During the day, he'd talk to the tourists who'd come from every part of Florida to gawk and ask questions. They'd arrive to see him as much as to see the hole and wonder if he didn't do what the man in the famous Argentinian film did and pull a lever in his bed, sending his wife down the precipice of his hate in order to rid himself of a woman who wasn't able to fly. After a while, they'd leave too, and at night he'd go into the backyard and cry while peeing, standing up. The house would no longer be there to hide his transgression, but just then, he wouldn't care. Sometime before midnight, he'd finish his crying because it would be useless and he'd know that, and decide to bury my things and Annie's things so as not to see them. My glass wind chimes, Annie's plush toys, the quilt and the small fan that I always took outside with me at the same time because I liked to make myself cold and warm but wanted to be prepared to remedy the situation either way. When he finished the burying of things, he'd make himself a bed on the side of the grass furthest from the hole and cry some more, realizing he was hungry and even the little farm store on the corner would have closed by then. Time would pass, he'd still miss us, but even then he'd never once question why I took Annie with me and not him. He wouldn't because he's known death and what it hungers for. warm skin against your hand, eyes that have no idea of what's coming, and love so steadfast it's irrational. That's what you need when you're staring into the hole and you know it. And all you want, all you beg for, is not to know it. He knows all this because he knows death and he knows me, and he'll understand, even be glad I had Annie to see me through. He'll remind himself that it was my decision to get on that elevator before I absolutely had to. And for the first time ever, he'll subscribe to the local newspaper and read it, if only so he can make sure to get the worst details about the most unimaginable tragedies, and so that he can continue to live and be grateful. So grateful that at least I'm better. I'm at peace, no longer in pain wherever I am. I must be better, he'll think, turning the page and reading another story, thanking God that at least I have the good fortune not to be here and have to see all this. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. You've been so great. And now it's my pleasure to introduce MJ. You know you like somebody's writing when you're begging them to rate a story that you read, I don't know, some time ago, and you still remember every word and you can't wait to hear again. So that's how I feel about her. Born in Port-au-Prince, Haiti, MJ Fibre published her first mystery novel, Le Feu de la Vengeance? Oh, okay. At the age of 16. At 19, she signed her first book contract with Hachette Deschamps in Haiti for the publication of a young adult book titled La Statuette Maléfique. Yay! Since then, MJ has authored 9 books in French. 2 years ago, one more released MJ's children's book, I Am Writing, written in 3 languages, English, French, and Haitian Creole. A Sky, the Color of Chaos is her first book in English. MJ holds a bachelor's degree in education from Barry University and an MFA from the creative writing program at Florida International University. She taught writing at Nova Middle School in Davie, Florida, and is currently a professor at Miami-Dade College. Let's welcome her.
Thank you again, everybody, for being here. I'm going to read short pieces tonight. I'm going to start with a poem, and then I'll explore the other genres. The poem is titled, How to Be a Dangerous Girl. I wanted to be the kind of girl who would steal smokes from her mother's purse and booze from her father's cabinet, who sneaked into R-rated movies at the local theater and lose her virginity in 8th grade to a high school sophomore who had his own car and liked to do it in the back seat. Become a dangerous girl, would drive in the middle of the road and wouldn't obey stop signs. I imagined that girl, hurried, naked, sweating with a forbidden lover on the twin-sized bed, under striped sheets and posters of boy bands, feeling no regret when daylight came, turning the sky from purple to blue, and then to a shocking bright light. But I barely understood the language of flirting, dating, love, passion. While Papa broke the porcelain vases and Mama went to bed with a cross of tears drying on her cheeks, I stared at the dark television, and in the curve of the screen, my reflection was at the end of a long black hallway. The second piece is a memoir piece called Anger and Pubic Hair. It's not part of my memoir, but if you want to get A Sky, the Color of Chaos, they do have copies in the back. Anger and Pubic Hair. JB is quiet, talks in a soft voice, built like olive oil, Popeye's girlfriend. It could probably hide behind a flagpole with room to spare. Hair dirty and hanging in dreads, it suffers from an obvious lack of coordination. I think he's cute, though not strikingly handsome. When he grins, full fleshy lips pull up over his teeth. He's got a crooked kind of smile, and this makes me like him all the more. I will let him kiss me today. This is what I've decided on my way to see JB and my best friend Joanne. In the street, I almost run, passing the glorious mess of an old Mitsubishi Pajero, resting on 4 flattened tires, paint peeling, windows cracked, and chassis rusting. Red clover stems are braided through the grill, and some small animal has made a nest in the backseat upholstery. One day, the Pajero will return completely to the earth, leaving nothing behind but a faint rust shadow on the grass. When I finally walk into Joanne's living room, JB is putting a videotape in the VHS. Soon, on the TV screen, a funny-looking man is picking up a woman at a club. I am flabbergasted when they get naked in the parking lot. The woman has shaved a pubic hair. Joanne and I are Catholic schoolgirls, protected girls. We still burst into hysterical laughter at the word penis. And suddenly, here we are, getting an education in sexual possibilities on the living room couch. Joanne will probably tell her parents later that we watched President Clinton on national television giving a speech about the embargo against Haiti. I suddenly realized that JB's face is buried in Joanne's neck, and she's laughing at his tickling, blowing kisses. I just sit there, staring at them. He's supposed to like me. And my best friend knows I like him, of course. I catch Joanne's eyes briefly. She looks away and whispers something in JB's ear. His head jerks up and whips around. I look away quickly, as if I'm the one who's been caught doing something wrong. When Joanne's mother walks in, the man on the screen is holding his erect penis. JB insists on walking me home. We leave without saying goodbye, run through small roads that do not have names, ignore the dirty children who shout tiffy whoosh at me, small children and big children, all with distended stomachs protruding. I feel my head waggle on my shoulders and have to force myself slower. I count my steps because I have a unhappy life. I place one foot in front of the other and assign a number for each step. It calms me, helps make life tolerable. JB tries to explain, but I don't want to listen. Anger turns and nuts my stomach. My throat is burning with tears. When I get home, I let him leave without a word. It is hard to realize that you are no longer necessary, that there is nothing you can give to make people want you. In the kitchen, Mother is in an impatient mood. She's inspecting a couple of spoons the maid has scrubbed and making angry, whispery grunts. She grabs a fistful of silverware from the wooden drawer and hastily examines each utensil. She's shaking her head, glowering. She dumps them in the sink, making a cutting clang, and walks away. The ringing lingers in my ears like a tuning fork. Soon my parents are arguing at the kitchen table. Eyes shut, Father's head is thrown back as he breathes heavily through his stuffed-up nose. Mother, a chaos of brown hair lashing her shoulders, leans across the table with a letter in her hand. I want to know what this is about, she says. Father tilts his head further back as though dodging a blow. When Joanne's mother calls about the porn video, my parents are too busy fighting that night. A few shoves, loud words, slaps, and then a beating that extends even to me. I can feel the cold marble floor on my kneecaps when my father drags me around the house. His hands are broad, sweaty, and cold, hands which try but somehow never succeed in smashing my mother's jaw and breaking her ribs. Later in Papa's study, I discover a sex book left on his desk. I study the various drawings. One shows a man and woman coupling, the man's buttocks exaggeratedly disproportionate to the rest of his small body, each swollen cheek looking as if it will soon birth some heaving beast. Another shows a woman's reproductive organs, the ovaries like rotten potatoes, the fallopian tubes ending like wires cut in an angry fit. Outside, a dog gives a sharp bark, and I imagine JB at home, his lips split into a canine grin. Okay, and the last part is fiction. I figured since I did poetry and memoir. I would also do fiction. And I'm reading this one mostly because Anjanette likes it so much. I figured, oh, I'll read it for her tonight. It's called Susan's Diary. October 26. Ping pong can be a good excuse to invite friends over and share a bottle of Courvoisier. Holden's been here every night. Oh, Holden, he gets me. Calls me Mamacita, makes me laugh. October 28. I want to take Holden to Eagles Lake and feed him crab rangoon. We'll walk naked, take in the smell of the pine trees, listen to the birds. We'll swim in the lake at midnight and make love until the wee hours of the morning. I've never been with anyone before. I'm saving myself for Holden. November 1st. Junior showed up at my door holding a machete. He was drunk and asked me to undress. Then he lost his balance and fell flat on his face. I used the machete to cut the bastard in pieces. I burned the carpet outside and cleaned up the living room after that. The police won't spend too much time looking for Junior. Even his mother will be glad he's gone away to New Mexico with some slut. November 3rd. The police came by. Holden mentioned that he saw Junior at my door the day he disappeared, and they wanted to ask me about it. One of the officers had really deep, chilly eyes, and I felt him probing my soul. I said, "No, sir, no one came by." I spent the whole afternoon in the kitchen making rice porridge and galletas for the church. They can all burn in hell, those who think I've seen that son of a bitch. November 5th. Holden's been looking at me weird, as if he's trying to find out about me, about what I'm capable of. He asked about the missing carpet, pretended he liked it, asking why I had to throw it away. My sister Bernice is having more and more of her friends over now for ping pong. All the jabbing and laughing. Oh God, make it stop. What will it take for these morons to get a life and get out of my space? November 16. Holden came to talk. His wife showed up with a shotgun, called him a cheater, and shot him. Now she's dead too. She didn't see me coming from behind the piano. It all took place in the living room, and the new carpet is ruined. November 17. I buried the wife in the backyard. Holden and I are going to Eagles Lake. November 18. I sleep every night in a small blue room nestled between a cross at the head of my bed and a painting of the Sacred Heart of Jesus at the foot. Holden lies still, his eyes wide open. November 19. Before Holden came here, the house smelled of flowers and floor polish. And the wooden furniture reflected your face back at you as you walked past. November 20th. Hot porridge is bubbling and steaming, letting out bursts of hot breath as it cooks. A smaller pot is emitting fiery gasps of greasy fish. I'm listening to the cries, squeals, and rustles in the blackness around us. Holden's mouth is always open, but he won't speak a word to me. November 21st. Holden's gotta go. I sat distracted at dinner, resting my head in my hand. Oh, the stench. November 22nd. I carried Holden to the lake. Above the bush, the stars, like the sun before them, shine impossibly bold and bright. Occasionally, a car drives by, its engine working, breaking the stillness. November 23rd. There is a police car stationed in front of the house. The cold, raw, wet morning sinks into my bones. Thank you. And now it's my pleasure to introduce our next reader, Jakira Diaz. She's the recipient of a Pushcart Prize, a Florida Individual Artist Fellowship, the Carl Gerasi Fiction Fellowship from the Wisconsin Institute for Creative Writing, and an NEA fellowship from the Hembridge Center for the Arts. She's been awarded fellowships or scholarships from the Sewanee Writers Conference, the MacDowell Colony, Summer Literary Seminars, the Tin House Summer Writers Workshop, the Virginia Center for the Creative Arts, and the Bread Loaf Writers Conference. Her work is noted in the Best American Essays, the Best American Non-Required Reading, and appears in The Guardian, Plowshares, Canyon Review, The Sun, the Southern Review, the Los Angeles Review of Books, and elsewhere. She is the editor of 15 Views of Miami, a collection of length short stories by 15 different Miami authors. I give you Jakira Diaz.
Thank you. I'm going to set my timer so that I'm not up here for too long. First, thank you all so much for coming. And I want to thank these ladies who, every single one of them, I'm proud to call my friend, for inviting me to read with them and for being so awesome and talented and beautiful. And they all smell so good, you have no idea. So I'm going to be reading the opening of a novel, which was published as a short story in the Kenyon Review a couple years ago. And it's a love story, but it's also a little bit dark. There are ghosts there, so. And it's dedicated to Staff Sergeant Ramos, who I love, who's sitting back there. Ghosts. 3 weeks before we pull the body from the river, I find Kofi waiting for me behind our camp. I spot him as I hike through the palms toward the outhouses. He's sitting under a mango tree, and I assume he's waiting for me, since villagers aren't allowed near the latrines, the command post, the sleeping quarters, or any of the drash tents. The night before, as we unloaded supplies for the hospital corpsman, Kofi introduced himself to Gunny Winchester, asked how much he had to pay for a night with me. Gunny explained that I wasn't a prostitute and that there would be more women Marines coming, so he better get used to giving us the same respect he gave the men. I thought that was the end of it, but afterward, I noticed him following me to the river, the armory, the motor pool. Everywhere I went, there was Kofi watching me, a toothless smile on his face. I made a point to know his name, to say it aloud as I passed him. Kofi. Know your enemy, Gunny always says. Know your enemy and know yourself. Kofi may not be a hostile, but he's a threat, and I'm stronger because I know this. I don't mention this to any of the guys. I know how some of them feel about women in combat, and although technically we're not in combat yet, I don't want to give them any leverage. I stop to light a cigarette. It's before sunrise and most of the platoon is still asleep, but the old guy doesn't worry me. He leans back against the tree, peels a ripe mango, and takes a great bite off his flesh, the juice running down his forearm. He tosses aside pieces of the peel as he's done with them, swats at flies. I check the perimeter for the fire watch, but I have to pee, so I'm not waiting for them to make their rounds. Besides, I can take care of myself. I make it to the outhouse without another glance at Kofi, toss my cigarette butt before locking the door. Then, as I squat over the hole in the ground, I hear him outside, moaning. I can make out the shadow of his bare feet on the other side of the door, his toes curling as he pulls on the handle. I roll my eyes, tap on the door a few times with the sole of my Gore-Tex boot. He stops. For a moment, no sound comes from the other side, so I finish my business. Then he pulls on the handle again, harder this time, and I worry that the makeshift lock will come loose, that he'll catch me with my cami trousers around my ankles. I know what will happen if he bursts through the door. I waste no time. After I pull up my trousers, I take one step back, and with all the strength I can muster, I kick the outhouse door. It flies open, lock breaking, then a crash I assume is wood against Kofi's skull. When I step out, he's flat on his back, covering his nose and mouth with both hands. His flaccid penis hangs out of his shorts. He is still moaning. I stare hard at him, pull on the brim of my cover low, pull the brim of my cover low to shade my eyes, crack my knuckles, and kick stones out of my path as I pass him. On my way back to camp, I run into Corporal Ramos smoking a cigarette by the tree line. Ramos is small, shorter than most of the guys in our squad, but muscular, a devil dog tattoo on his forearm. He's a serious guy. We got pretty close during our tour in Iraq last year. A couple of weeks before we landed in Campo Verde, he told me that his wife is expecting their first son. I congratulated him, but secretly, I envied his happiness. Still do. "You okay, Vega?" he asked, and right away, I know he saw the whole thing. I'm glad he didn't step in like some of the other guys would. "I'm cool," I say, turning into the trail. Ahead, through the canopy of tropical palms and cebas and bamboo, the sunlight is beginning to filter in. When the first bombs dropped, half of Campo Verde was destroyed, most of the people injured or killed. The survivors were left with no homes, no crops, and no potable water. Our platoon was ordered here to assist with the relief effort, mostly water purification, but we arrived 6 days after the grunts and hospital corpsmen set up camp. They'd been operating and treating the injured, but were running low on supplies. By the time we landed, most of the critically wounded had died of infection and dehydration. Out of almost 300 villagers, 41 remain. 7 of them are women. The villagers are surprised to see a female Marine. They watch me, but will not look away when I catch them like they do with the men. They look me up and down like I'm a strange thing, an apparition they don't recognize. Out of our whole squad, only Ramos and I speak Spanish, so we spend most of the day translating for the hospital corpsmen. It isn't our job, but we've lost more than half our guys since the war started, so we do whatever needs to be done. I work with the women and children, and Ramos helps out with the men. The rest of our squad takes to the river with the water purification units. I'm opening boxes in the field hospital when Lieutenant Harris, a fleet surgeon, rushes in. He carries one of the women in his arms. 2 corpsmen follow, pulling on surgical gloves as the doc sets her on a bed. "Corporal Vega," Lieutenant Harris calls over his shoulder. "Get over here." I push aside a half-empty box of surgical tape cartridges, wipe my hands on my camis. "Aye, aye, sir." "Take her hand." "Yes, sir," I say, reaching for the woman's hand. I notice she isn't a woman at all, but a girl. She's at least 8 months pregnant, but it's clear she's just a girl, no more than 12 or 13, her brown skin glistening and beaded with sweat. She squeezes my fingers, her eyes wide. "Corporal," Lieutenant Harris says, "tell her everything is fine." He douses her belly with an orange iodine solution. I smile at her. "Todo está bien." I hold her hand while Lieutenant Harris and the 2 corpsmen work on her, trying not to see the blood, although the scent of it is in my nostrils, in the back of my throat. I know the smell. After my mother died of leukemia 4 years ago, the smell lingered. It was in my clothes, my hair, in the bathroom we'd shared, even though when she died, she hadn't lived with me for almost a year. I sat in the prison hospital with her 6 days, tending to a nosebleed that just wouldn't stop. The last day, the stench was unbearable, like she was rotting from the inside out. On the bed, the girl's breathing grows faint, her grasp on my hand loose. I squeeze it. She is drenched in sweat now, her lips chapped, teeth small and yellow, some of them darkening to brown. "What's your name?" I ask her in Spanish, but she doesn't respond. Lieutenant Harris holds up her baby, a boy, but he doesn't cry. He hands him off to one of the corpsmen. The girl glances at her baby. "Churao," she says, a word I don't recognize. "Is that your name?" I ask. She coughs, tries to shake her head. "Ghosts," she says, before releasing my hand. I signed the papers to Baker Act my mother at 3 a.m. on a Saturday, the Saturday of my 18th birthday. After they took her, I borrowed a neighbor's car and followed the police cruisers to the Citrus House. The clinic was 4 miles from our trailer park in West Hialeah, and I already knew the way. I double parked in the ambulance lane, rushed into the lobby as they tried to control her. She was pushing and kicking and threatening to set me on fire in my sleep. She swore she would never forgive me. She swore I was not her daughter. It took 3 cops and 2 nurses to wrestle her onto the linoleum floor, to sedate her and lift her onto a gurney with 4-point restraints. I wasn't sure if I'd imagined a bed with restraints. Handcuffs, maybe, since I was used to her run-ins with the cops, but not this. She'd been here twice in the last couple of years, and I'd never seen her restrained. It seemed like something out of a horror movie, like straitjackets or electroshock treatment. The sedatives started taking effect even before they finished strapping her in. As they wheeled the gurney into the hallway, she lifted her head and looked at me. I expected her to spit at me, to curse me, to describe how she slit my throat and watch me bleed to death, grind my bones into dust afterward. That I was used to, but not the silence, not the pleading look in her eyes. "Don't do this to me," she said. That was all she said. As they wheeled her past the double doors into the ward, I stood in the hallway and held myself, but said nothing. I was certain that this wouldn't be the last time. We'd be back here 3-4 times in the next year, probably. I was sure of it. That was the last time I heard my mother speak, on the morning of my 18th birthday. Less than a year later, she was gone. We never learned the girl's name. We try to find the father of the baby, a family member, anyone who can tell us something about her, but no one comes forward. There are just 6 women left in the village, but none of them seem to know the girl. I mentioned her last words, ask about churao. What language is it? I want to know, but they wave me off, refuse to hear anymore, forbid me to repeat the word. The women insist that the girl must be buried, that she must hold her baby in her arms. She is not to be burned with all the other dead. They give me beads to place around her neck, rosemary sprigs that must be tossed into the grave with their remains. Lieutenant Harris insists that we honor the women's wishes. Maybe he can't stomach the thought of a burning newborn. He orders Ramos and me to bury them behind our camp. We take turns digging in silence, passing a bottle of sugarcane rum back and forth, wiping the sweat off our faces with our forearms. After a while, Ramos throws his shovel to the ground, pulls off his skivvy shirt. I keep digging. No one should have to bury a baby, I said. I can tell he's thinking about his wife, his baby boy who will be born in a couple of months. During moments like this, when Ramos has that distant look, I'm reminded that I have no one to think about back home, no one to send me care packages filled with clean socks and magazines and Gatorade and baby wipes. It was the water, Ramos says. He takes a mouthful of the rum and sets the bottle down. They were drinking straight from the river before we came. Really? He nods. The well ran dry weeks ago, even before the bombs. We lower the body into the ground. I picture the girl's sweaty face, her rotting teeth, the baby in her arms. This whole place, Ramos says, it smells like death. I tossed the rosemary over the bodies. Romero, the women called it. We cover them with dirt. They say there are ghosts in the jungle. The children see them often, hear them calling, follow them through the trees down to the river. The women say it's as if the ghosts were dropped along with the bombs. What else can you expect with so much suffering, so much death? Many of the children are motherless now. They should be watched. The women say that children who are not watched will run off into the jungle in search of ghosts and will never again be children. It has happened before, the children taken, and the next time they were seen, they were almost ghosts themselves, wielding the weapons of war. Handguns, rifles, machetes. The bombing moves farther south every day. Transient troops use our camp as a stopover. So many of us coming and going, I never know when I'll see some of these guys again, except for Corporal Ramos, who's on fire watch with me every other night. While most of the camp is asleep in their tents, the 2 of us stay up shooting the shit or talking about home. How odd it is that Ramos and I are both from Miami, how we enlisted the same year, the same month, but just met last year before getting deployed to Iraq. Ramos and I are standing watch one night, smoking Newports in the clearing behind the field hospital, when I spot someone in the jungle, standing in the darkness, just standing there, a figure among the trees and giant ferns, looking right at us. Ramos, I say, taking my eyes off the figure for just a second. When I turn back, it's gone. I raise my rifle, scan the brush ahead, then freeze, listen for footsteps in the thicket of the downed trees. On my cue, Ramos tenses up, drops his cigarette, and aims his rifle, stepping forward slowly, checking the perimeter. I follow closely, in formation, shine my beam across the clearing. You hear something? He asks. No. I'm not sure if I heard anything, but I definitely saw someone. There was a guy, though, just standing there. He takes one last look around, lowers his rifle. Probably one of the villagers, he says. You didn't see him? You looked right at him. I lower my rifle, but keep my eyes trained on the tangle of vines and bushes and trees at the edge of the clearing. He turns back toward the field hospital. All I saw was darkness, he says. The rest of our watch is uneventful. We're relieved by Lance Corporals Jure and Aparicio. We head for our separate tents, but I lay awake listening to the sounds of the night. I used to listen to the traffic outside my window back in Miami. During those weeks my mother spent in the Citrus House, I barely slept. And afterward, when she was transferred to Dade County Jail after stabbing another patient in the neck with a pencil, I would chain smoke in bed, listening to the trailer park warfare. The couple in the next trailer would hurl plates and shoes and tables at each other, fights that would spill out into the street at 2, 3 in the morning, and would usually end with one of them being hauled off in the back of a squad car. A few weeks after we got to Camp Fallujah in Iraq, I told Ramos about my mother, told him how I'd been thinking about enlisting even before my 18th birthday, how I'd considered leaving without saying goodbye. Seemed easier than visiting my mother in jail and then prison. And how when she got sick, it started to feel like a dream, like I'd never be free. After she was cremated, the Department of Corrections sent her ashes in the mail. I got a card in the mailbox telling me to pick up the package in the post office. That's horrible, Ramos said. But I wasn't looking for sympathy. It was a long time ago. In my tent, I swat at mosquitoes for hours. In Iraq, we had camel spiders the size of Volkswagens. In Campo Verde, we have mosquitoes that fly through walls and pick up small children. When I can't take it anymore, I pull away the netting over my cot and head out. I feel my way to Ramos's tent in the dark. He's awake and doesn't seem all that surprised to see me. He pulls off his shirt, and I'm glad I don't have to endure the awkwardness of his rejection and then have to face him in the morning. Our faces are slick with sweat, our necks sunburned and covered in grime. My hair is knotted. We reek of motor oil and mosquito repellent and foot powder, and when he goes down on me, I'm sure he imagines his wife. I try to picture her face, but can't. All I come up with is the dark silhouette of a pregnant woman. I imagine he can't picture her either after being on deployment for so long. All this time, I've been closer to Ramos than any of the other guys in my platoon, yet I've never even called him by his first name. Jason, I say, just to hear what it sounds like. He doesn't respond, doesn't look into my eyes or kiss me or even let me see his face. There is a sound of our breathing, our dog tags clinking against each other, the faraway spray of gunfire in the night, the rustling of dry foliage somewhere in the jungle. He will feel guilty in the morning, and he will tell me about it, since I have become the one he goes to with his guilt, with his loneliness, with his fear. For a moment, I long for the same thing, something to feel guilty about, someone waiting for me back home, ready to start living the life I deliberately left behind. But there is no one. I'm going to stop there. Thank you. Thank you. That was so depressing. And I'm going to be introducing our last reader for the night. Dr. Amina Gauthier, who's just Amina to me. And I'm going to tell you how we met, actually. Amina and I met at the Sewanee Writers Conference, where we were, two out of 4 people of color. And she immediately embraced me and decided that we were going to be friends. And we've been friends ever since. And so we also danced together that summer a lot. And occasionally we go out for lunch at Bubba Gump's. That's our thing, which we're going to be doing on Tuesday again. And I'm very sure after reading three of her three books, that all of her dreams are going to come true. I am sure that she's going to end up winning a Pulitzer and that I'm going to end up going back to high school without any pants on. So, you're in for a real treat. Dr. Amina Gauthier is the author of 3 award-winning short story collections, At Risk, Now We Will Be Happy, and The Loss of All Lost Things, which just came out, and you can get it here. At Risk was awarded the Flannery O'Connor Award, the First Horizon Award, and the Eric Hoffer Legacy Fiction Award. Now We Will Be Happy was awarded the Prairie Schooner Book Prize in Fiction, the Florida Authors and Publishers Association President's Book Award, and a USA Best Book Award. The Loss of All Lost Things was awarded the Elixir Press Award in Fiction, and her fiction has been supported with fellowships and scholarships from the Betsy Hotel, the Key West Literary Seminars, the MacDowell Colony, the Ragdale Foundation, Sewanee Writers Conference, the UCross Foundation, and Vermont Studio Center. She currently teaches in the MFA program at the University of Miami. Put your hands together for Amina Gauthier.
When you read with people you know, they tell all your business. They forget that it's being aired live, and now everyone's going to show up on Tuesday at Bubba Gump expecting, a free meal. We'll keep you posted on the time. Thanks, everybody, for coming out tonight, and I'm really honored to read with such an amazing panel of women writers. I don't have a short story that I can read in 12 minutes, so I'm going to read the last 6 pages of a short story entitled As I Wander. So just really quickly to fill you in on what you're missing. The story starts the night that a woman's husband has been funeralized. He committed suicide as a side effect of Huntington's disease. And the part that I'm going to read from takes place a month later while she's still figuring out ways of grieving. The husband's name is Gene. The wife's name is Judy. And they have a neighbor named Hank. And the man who will appear, the dark matter of love, he's unnamed. She'd sat on a bench in the park until the sun came up. During the day, people brought their dogs to the park, and on the weekends, it became one giant flea market. But at night, it was a place for transients. Judy sat there until the last owners took their dogs home, until the last grad students headed back to their apartments, until the last families bundled up their children and took them away, until the last couples stopped kissing and waited. She watched them all leave, some getting into their cars, some boarding the trolleys on Baltimore and Chester Avenues, and some simply walking. Then she made her way deeper into the large park. West Philadelphia's homeless buried themselves in the park's recesses, away from the vigilance of campus security bike patrollers who swarmed the park's perimeters, bent on protecting students who lived off campus. Judy selected a bench among them and huddled. She had lost her ability to find anything disgusting in mingling among those whom she would have normally avoided. Most, she guessed, were addicts or mentally ill, but she made no distinction between herself and them. Life had stolen something from them, robbed them, made them crazy and despairing so that they cared only for something to distract them. The park had become a depository for the unwanted, forgotten, and discarded. Sitting there in Jean's extra-large fleece, Judy pulled her arms deep within the sleeves and laid herself down among them, wrapped in the fleece full of Jean's funk. Jean had said he would not leave her before it was his time to go, and she had believed him. The next morning, when she made it the few blocks back home, there had been no garbage cans on the curbs, yet now here they were. Across the street, old man Sampson bumped a shopping cart down his front steps. Haphazardly thrown into the cart were hardback books without covers, institutional copies. She assumed he was going to campus to return them. Why he did not pack them into bags, she did not know. The books, jumbled as they were, poked through the spaces in his cart. With every bump of the wheel against the concrete steps, the pile jostled and tomes threatened to slip out. No garbage cans lined Sampson's curb. After he pushed his cart down the street and crossed it, Judy thought how neighborly it would have been of her to remind him of garbage day. Later that day, Judy brought out a folding chair and placed it on her top step. From her vantage point, she'd be able to see Sampson's return. She would apologize for not reminding him about the garbage and assume responsibility for him suffering the inconvenience of keeping his trash around an extra week. Judy knew little of him, only that he was a retired professor, that he lived alone, and that he had an abundance of young male visitors. Jean had not liked him. Since she'd taken to wandering, she'd seen the parade of young black boys going in and out of the old man's house at all hours of the night. To Judy, they seemed impossibly young and thuggish, arrogantly rough. Small and wiry, they were none of them over 6 feet tall. Judy was no fool. She knew Sampson's preferences, but it was not her place to judge. The 42 bus was at the top of the hill, inching its way down Spruce when a young man jogged up Sampson's steps, rang the bell, and waited. "He's not home," Judy yelled. The boy looked for the voice. She stood and waved until he noticed her. He crossed the street. "You say something to me?" "Sampson's not home." "He always home." "I saw him leave earlier," she said. "He had a cart full of books." "Oh," the boy said, as if that explained everything. He was standing at the edge of her steps. "Are you his nephew?" "Nah," he said. "I ain't related to that boy." In his mouth, boy sounded like ball. "Do you work for him then?" she asked. He wore a do-rag on his head and was dressed in a long, plain white T-shirt that came down to his knees and a pair of baggy jeans barely visible beneath the T-shirt, looking like so many other young boys she had seen all over West Philadelphia, indistinct and indistinguishable. His youth clung to him, a mixture of freshness, arrogance, and bravado. He smirked. "Work for him?" "Yeah, you could say that." Judy had seen the old man a scant number of times and had spoken to him but once. His voice had been gravelly, reminding her of Louis Armstrong's. On the rare occasion she did see him, he made her think of a turtle with his shy and slow ways, his heavy-lidded eyes, and his wide, wide mouth. She could not picture him and this insolent youth together. "He forgot to take out his trash today," she said. The youth shrugged. "I don't do garbage." "How long ago you say he left?" "About 2 hours, I guess." "Shit." "I guess he'll be back soon," Judy said. The boy looked at his watch. "He ain't coming back for hours." He turned to go. Judy did not want him to. He was the first person, other than Hank, that she'd spoken to within all the days that made up the month that it had been since Jean's passing. "You ever read any Baldwin?" she asked. "Nah. Who's that?" "I would imagine that Sampson has a lot of interesting books." "I don't read when I'm over there." He smirked again and hitched his pants, giving Judy what she supposed was meant to be a belligerently knowing stare. She saw only the awkward patch of dark hairs above the bridge of his nose where his brows connected. The boy held a toothpick between teeth that was strong and white. She guessed he'd wanted to make her uncomfortable, but she felt only a rush of desire for the arrogant and impervious youth. "You can wait in here if you like." He followed her in and moved through her house as if he'd been in it 100 times, making a circuit through her enclosed porch, living room, and dining room, picking up things and looking at them as he went. "Does Sampson's house look like this?" she asked. "Kind of, but he's got more junk and shit than you," he said. "He never clean up. There'd be like papers everywhere. I gotta step all over them. I try to be careful, but sometimes it's like too many and I step on one and then he get all crazy, be like, that's my conference paper from 1992. And I be like, damn, nigga, if it's that important, why you got it lying on the floor and shit? Pick that shit up. He stopped abruptly, as if realizing he'd said too much. He patted the couch and sat down. Nah, this here is real clean, he said. Real nice. He picked up the universal remote control and turned on the TV without asking. He skipped through the channels before finally settling on some sort of reality show. From what Judy could tell, the premise of the show was for young and uncouth women to attend a version of charm school in order to compete for the hand of a former rapper who lacked charm himself. So where your husband at? He asked. I buried him last month. My bad, he said, not looking away from the TV screen. You ain't got no pictures of him nowhere. The sicker Jean had become, the more he'd refused to take pictures with her since he could not be sure to smile. His face seemed to settle into a permanent grimace he could neither feel nor control. Remember me the way I was when I met you, he would say, whenever Judy tried to change his mind. She had only 2 pictures with Jean, their wedding photo and a picture that had been taken of them on the Spirit of Philadelphia. She'd removed those pictures from the living room before the wake and had put them upstairs in her bedroom. In both pictures, Jean had been smiling. I don't like taking pictures, Judy said. The youth shrugged and put his feet on the coffee table. Judy waited for him to ask what Jean had died of and thought of how to answer, but the boy switched to another reality show about students at a historically black college and became engrossed. She asked how much Samson paid him, and it was very little. She removed the money from her wallet and laid it on the table by his feet. He looked at her until she began to feel she had erred. Then he crushed the bills in his hands and shoved them deep into his pocket. She gestured for him to remove the black nylon stocking cap tied around his head. Beneath the do-rag, his hair was braided in a complex pattern with 2 whorls on either side that reminded her of ram's horns. Judy lightly touched his hair, finding it as soft and downy as a child's. He pulled her hand away. Don't touch me, he said, and no marks either. Okay, Judy said. She thought of stipulating her own conditions for protection, then decided she had nothing to lose. After taking off his do-rag, he removed the rest of his clothing, revealing a lanky frame. His legs were long, his calves small, hard knobs protruding from the backs of bony legs. She pulled his face to her and kissed him hard and tasting. His lips were soft and fleshy, unlike the rest of him. He was surprisingly gentle and silent within her. She'd expected the inadequacy of youth, the exaggerated violence of the disadvantaged. She'd wanted to be an outlet for his unleashed anger, had prepared for it, hoped it would cleanse her of her own. If she was angry, she had no one to blame but herself. Though she'd married late in life, their marriage had been her first. It had been Jean's second. By the time they'd met, Judy had convinced herself that she was bored with the formalities of dating and she cared more for companionship than courting. She and Jean had dated a mere 3 months. She had not been deceived. She had known what she was getting into. She knew Jean was getting sick, knew she loved him, knew he hadn't wanted to die alone. 3 months or 3 years of dating would not have changed her feelings or her decision. Some called it selfish and calculating. His family accused her of lying in wait, marrying him just because he was dying. Once he'd gotten sick, they'd wanted to lock him away in a nursing home and wait for him to die. They'd behaved as if he were a nuisance. Judy was his protection, his shield against a lonely death. She had not thought of needing her own protection. Of course, she had known that Jean would die before her, but she had not known how it would feel once the empty days came. She'd thought that she could prepare for it, keep it from touching her as deeply as she'd suspected it was able. The boy's eyes, liquid black, were focused on something just over her shoulder. His body seemed to move of its own accord. He seemed oddly untouched, detached from the manipulations of his body, as if sex were something one did rather than something one had. Somewhere in his own neighborhood, he had a girlfriend whom he did not think of at times like this. Somewhere he had a separate life that he kept intact. Like her, he foolishly believed he had an impenetrable core that defined him, shielded him from his outward self, kept him from being touched. In minutes, he was asleep, his legs carelessly anchoring her. Judy touched his face, finding it remarkably smooth. She'd loved all the lines on Jean's face. Summers spent down on the beaches of the Jersey Shore had not been kind to Jean, but she'd loved the deep creases of the premature wrinkling that had given his face character. It was unfair, Jean had said, meeting her at a time like that. He'd said he wished he had the proper time to court her, said they shouldn't lose a single day together. The man that had finally taken his own life, rather than continue to waste away, was not her husband. Jean had promised not to, so long as Judy didn't put him away. She'd kept her word, relying upon the tenuous love of the dying man who had taken all of their remaining days, all of their tomorrows, and left her with only promises, fragile as strands of hair. The boy jerked under her hand, and Judy touched his hair lightly, soothingly, her fingers wandering over his intricately patterned cornrows, following their winding paths along the contour of his head to the base of his skull, where they curled under at the ends. Once he quieted, Judy grasped the soft and tenuous braids, undoing the plaited strands. Thank you.
Do we have time for questions? Absolutely have time for questions. Okay, so if you have any questions for us, we're willing to take them.
How did this group come together? You guys know each other before this, or is this meeting at some sort of before thing?
It looks like a question for Anjanette.
Repeat the question. How did the group come together? Just really easy. She emailed us and basically forced us to be here, told us she wasn't going to pay us, she wasn't going to just show up. But we'd met.
You mean we're not getting paid?
No.
We're not getting paid?
We're not. The other one. So I met them at Bread Loaf. She was my fellow. And then she introduced me to Jakira. And then MJ and I had met because we both graduated the same MFA program. But I think this place is kind of a center for also getting together. We just sort of always see each other here, come to each other's readings. And it's kind of like the beginning to form a community, I think, of writers. And it's so important, just having other people who write too, that you can sit next to, even if you're not talking, but she's writing, I'm writing, and we're, you know. So I think that's how it really gelled, right? Yeah.
Anyone else?
I have one. How do you find inspiration? I mean, is this something you are exposed to that kind of triggers a story in your head, or and I would imagine it comes from multiple sources, but
Jackie.
So
I know where that comes from.
I don't wait for inspiration. I feel like if I waited for inspiration, I never get anything done. So I keep like ideas for stories, things like that. I keep a notebook and I'm always writing something down. Usually they come at the worst possible moments, like in the shower, when I'm in the middle of shaving my legs, when I'm driving, when I'm asleep in bed. And I have to like rush to my notebook and write them down. And sometimes I'm rushing out of the shower with a towel wrapped around me trying to write something down. Other times if my phone is around, I record it real quick so I don't forget. But you don't wait for inspiration. Just start writing and maybe something good will happen while you're writing.
All right. Last chance for questions. Well then, in that case, ma'am, it's just the question there in the front row.
When will we see you again?
It's coming up, huh?
Well, this was a specific Valentine's Day reading, so I think you can check the Books and Books author events and see if we're reading individually. I don't know if the Supremes are going to reunite again, you know, because for real, who's the flow? But no, MJ and I will be reading again on April 16th at the Literary Jazz Brunch Cafe, which will be at the Ritz-Carlton. And I think maybe you can look for us all of us most likely at the Miami Book Fair in the fall, and keep checking the Books and Books webpage.
Thank you. Oh, question. You talked about it, and you talked about a community of writers. Is there such a thing as a community of writers in Miami? Yes.
The question is there a community of writers in Miami? An active community of writers in Miami? Yes, I think there's more than one. There are a lot of communities of writers in Miami. There are poets, there are fiction writers, nonfiction writers. There's the MFA program at the University of Miami. There's an MFA program at FIU. There's Miami-Dade College, the Center for Literature and Writing. There are things that happen in the Miami Book Fairs. There are a lot of organizations such as Reading Queer and Oh Miami, and there are tons of them. You just have to look. Talk to people, talk to writers, talk to us, talk to each other. They're all over the place, a lot of them.
I want to say also, because I think I moved here to Miami about 23, I want to say 23, almost 24 years ago. And I don't think there was. I'm sure there was. It was just too underground, right? Yeah, right. Yeah, right. That's my daughter over there, so yeah, no. And she's 25, so, and that's the youngest. Yeah. Thank you, Migdalia. And this store was in the corner. You remember? There was no opera. There was no Pam. I think there was the museum in the downtown. It was just a long time ago. I think things were more underground. I think we're really lucky now. If you've lived here for decades, you know it was hard before. I think there wasn't so much of a conscience. I think Books and Books and the fair and so many other things that have happened have now created it so that people know that they have to make their own community of writers, right? My students, of which some are around today, they, you know, my class ended and they now meet and they write and they do things and they do their own writing group. Don't wait for, you know, you can just shape your own community, right? Not new. I read new things. No, my novels are. None of it was from the novels. It was just from the new things. But hers is. I know yours is. Right. Yeah.
Mine isn't, but you can give me money and I'll email you stuff.
She's focused. She's focused.
Do you have other books in the store?
We do. I wrote 2 novels and I published them and they're out there. It's just I was trying today to see something else. If you guys didn't stand up and just run away, I knew I was onto something. I could keep working on it, so that was good.
Chiquita, 15 Views of Miami is out there on the table. Yes. So if there are no more questions, then we have many, many titles from these brilliant authors on display on a table in the front room over there. They're going to be signing here at the table to the left of the podium, so please give another hand to Anjanette, Jakira, MJ, and Amina. Thank you very much. All right.